So Tim Dillon has some thoughts about what's going on here in D.C. and around the country. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
They've already got the cops on the street that are not cops or that are the military. They've already got the National Guard on the street. They already have all your information in D.C., and now they just get to decide what is and isn't over the line. That should scare everybody. You're fucking nuts, dude. If this doesn't scare you, you're nuts. All of these things that Alex Jones, and I've had Alex on, I like Alex, but all these things that Alex Jones was like worried about when I listened to him in the late 90s, early 2000s are coming to fruition. And I don't know where he is on all of that stuff, but like, I know he's a big fan of Trump, but like, this is everything Alex Jones always talked about. Military in the street, the FEMA camp, the tech company that monitors everything, the surveillance. This is all of that. I mean, not to sound like a fucking nut. This is everything a crackhead. And I don't even mean a crackhead like crack, but a guy smoking weed in a room with a fucking black light. He'd be like, bro, there's going to be military in the street. They're going to put you in jail for your fucking thoughts, man. If you just say them, bro, you're going to be in fucking jail. There's going to be a fucking company that monitors everything you do, bro. Like, this is literally the wet dream of every conspiracy theorist that has ever lived, and it's happening now.
Making a lot of good points there. I mean, the Alex Jones call in particular, it is so true that all of like sort of the wildest theorizing about what a government crackdown could look like a lot of it is unfolding before us. You have the kidnapping of people for wrong thought, wrong think on Israel, and the crackdown. There was we're going to cover the fact that they're going to now screen everybody's social media before they come in the country for quote unquote anti-Semitism, using the Department of Education and HHS to make sure you're cracking down on that as well. The National Guard. 6 different states' National Guards here in D.C. to we actually put C4 up on the screen. You had an MRAP that T-boned a civilian regular vehicle here in D.C. It's something similar that happened in L.A., by the way, where you had, I think it was ICE agents in a regular vehicle that T-boned somebody as they were speeding around the city. Just absolutely dystopian. Then you add in the Palantir contract and what all of that is going to look like, the deportations with no due process in a slave labor camp. And, Alex Jones has expressed concerns about a few things, but you can imagine if this was being done by a Democrat, it would be complete hair on fire, because it really is a lot of the conspiracy theorizing, worst case scenario over the years just sort of playing out in front of us in real time.
I think it's fair. It pains me to say it, but I do think it is fair. And when it is, especially because if I think back to January 6th and the federal occupation of our city, which I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah, we both
cost
said
hundreds
so
of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And, it's very hard because on the one hand, I cannot stand people talking about how, DC is safe and it's great. No, sorry, ridiculous. The violent crime is still bad. Yes, it's down. It's still much higher than it was 5 years ago. Union Station is a shithole. It has been a shithole for 5 years. I've lived here since 2010, which, by the way, in retrospect, was the best year to ever live here. It's the lowest of the violent crime rate has ever been. By 2014, it's gone downhill. There's a lot of reasons for that. The crime situation is bad. I lived on the block, literally, where Big Balls was assaulted or whatever. Somebody was murdered, shot in the head, innocent bystander, exactly 1 block away. The restaurant I took my parents to was the subject of a gunfight less than 3 days later, where somebody was shot and almost killed, bullet holes that were sprayed in the way. I'm not exaggerating. It's bad, and it's been bad. There are different ways to fix it. And this is generally not the competent way. And I think that's kind of been my, if you were to say my break with the Trump administration, it's that they have, in many cases, I think, points about illegal immigration, about crime in DC. But what they choose is the showmanship versus the execution. And that's actually bad for 2 reasons, and I'll explain, which is it negatively polarizes the entire country about the point that you're actually trying to make. And the point that you make doesn't even get fixed. So you kind of pair those 2 things together where, yeah, it's fun to do your little press conference, at Union Station. And what you do is you troll the liberals into trying to say that actually Union Station is safe, when in reality it's look, if you live here, we have two huge problems here in Washington, D.C. Number one is juvenile offenders. That and basically lack of prosecution. That is a literal Biden policy that was adopted and led to widespread crime throughout the entire city, carjackings, etc. That is an attorney general problem, which is very easily solved. In fact, actually, and I'm curious because this is where the libertarian everything aligns. Jeanine Pirro, is that her name? Jeanine
Yeah.
Pirro? Yeah, Judge Jeanine just announced yesterday that DC will no longer pursue firearms charges against people in the city. And I'm like, well, the libertarian in me who's like, yeah, good. But the other hand is like, if we're all being honest, like gun charge is the easiest way to get most of these people off the streets.
Well, that's what the black 2A advocates often say, is that gun charges are the way that
it's how you go federal.
That's how the criminal justice system is. That's the entry point.
Yes, it's the easiest way to get somebody locked up.
A bunch of people, disproportionately black people. And I mean, I do think so zooming out from DC, this country has much higher rates of violent crime in cities across the country than similarly situated, like developed nations around the world.
No question.
No doubt about it. I think if you look at, the differences between those countries, one of the things is we are awash in guns. That is a big part of that is not something that Republicans want to do anything about whatsoever. And like you said, Pirro is going in the opposite direction here in DC in terms of actually, cracking down on the firearms here. DC comparatively has relatively tight firearm restrictions, but obviously it's, a city with Virginia on the other side. In Virginia, you can get any gun you want basically anytime with very few restrictions.
But this is the DC has the strictest gun laws in the entire country.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
There's Virginia's right there.
Sure.
And so it makes it
but Maryland has some of the Maryland has the same standards as California. So
the country as a whole is awash in firearms. And that is certainly, now it may not be all of it. I think the mass inequality, the fact that you have this like entrenched underclass, very little social safety net, I think that is part of it as well. I'm not saying that it's one thing, but that's part of the conversation. But, some of, to me, the most interesting reporting that's been going on, Saagar, and I think you would share this sentiment, is the journalists who actually went into, Anacostia, across the river, the neighborhoods that suffer the most from violent crime, truly, and talked to residents there. And we're like, how do you feel about this? And there's an openness to law enforcement.
They're like, listen, we're open to it. Yeah, that's true. It's on the record.
I mean, they're like, we would like to see more law, and we would love it if this would help. But there is zero. I mean, first of all, there's very little presence there at all. This has all been, MRAPs on the mall and outside of Union Station and protecting Georgetown cupcakes or whatever, which is, not to say there's zero crime in those places, but much less than in other parts of the city. So that's number one. But number two, if they were serious about wanting to get no, you just can't take them seriously. This is the same government that stripped $1 billion in funding from the DC budget that is supposed to go to things like public safety. So lo and behold, we can put C5 up on the screen. They did a poll of DC residents, the people that this is supposedly meant to help, and 8 in 10 are like, no. Of course, we don't want this. 8 in 10 Washingtonians oppose Trump taking control of DC's police and federal troops patrolling the streets. You have the question specifically is, do you support or oppose Trump ordering the federal government to take control of DC's police department, and ordering the National Guard and FBI to patrol DC? 9% strongly support, 8% somewhat support, and then you have 79% who either strongly oppose. And by the way, the strongly oppose is 69%. So nearly 70% of the city is like absolutely not. And again, those are the people that they're posturing like they want to help, and everyone can just see through it. And Saagar, the thing that I've struggled with in sort of like communicating about this administration, or even intellectualizing this administration and really trying to like grapple with it in a way that's not hyperbolic or hysterical, is on the one hand, you have these preposterously authoritarian shows of force that are just meant to demonstrate like, military crackdown. And on the other hand, they're so like incompetent and buffoonish. And so it's hard to take seriously the, authoritarian nature of what's being done when you call in National Guard from 6 surrounding states and, MRAPs in the streets and all this crap. It's hard to take seriously that, when on the other hand, they're like a bunch of idiotic, incompetent, trolling clowns.
I would say that is the critique that I am the most sympathetic to, and again, I think is also the one which is going to land the best because it's about the both. It's it's hard because I literally moved out here because of crime. And I know a lot of other people who did. It's bad. And it's like, I can't sit and be gaslit by people who are telling me that it's not good. It's horrible. And I've lived here for so long that I actually watched the decline. It's quality of life, crime, and the general feeling of safety. And sorry, yes, that's an actual feeling of safety, which entails vagrancy and general just like having to worry about getting stabbed by somebody mentally ill on the street is a real thing. Same in Union Station. You watched it go from a place of business people to bum showers in the span of 2 to 3 years. And it really still has not really returned to how it used to be. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, COVID and all of that one, but this is where I get frustrated, with the Washington, D.C. residents. They don't actually want to do anything about it. That's part of the other problem. There, DC City Council, the mayor may be pro-cop, the city council shoots down every single attempt to try and hire more MPD officers. The juvenile problem is the one that the city council members themselves are the ones who are fighting for more leniency, which is leading to all this truancy crisis. And by the way, this city spends more than every other public school per capita than any place in the country, and they have the highest truancy rate, some 30% of DC students are truant. Something that Delano Squire said on our show, which uncomfortable, but people always want to whitewash it. Like, if you have a school district where 90% truant, that's a parent problem. It's true. And people need to, no. We have to get real.
Know, but Saagar,
if you are 90% of you are letting your kids out,
but I actually thought what he said was so silly, though.
Why?
Because he was like, his answer was like, the mayor should say parents should do a better job. And it's like, what the fuck is that going to do?
No, hold them accountable.
That's actually a more pathetic answer than like what leftists typically do.
No, hold them accountable. It's the same way. If your kid is 15 and they use your AR-15 to go and shoot up a school, you need to be prosecuted for that. I agree
serious with that. But his thing was just like, wag your finger at them. I'm like, that's not going to do anything.
It's not just, they need to go to jail. Like, if your kid is out there carjacking and you have had multiple warnings from the school district and all of that, I'm sorry, you need to be held accountable. And the truth is that they have embraced all of these BLM Ferguson like anti-crime policy or anti-police policies since 2014. Not an accident that's the year that the city went to shit.
But you do have to also acknowledge the crime rate has gone down.
It has gone down from the height of 2020. It's still way higher than 2010.
I'm not an expert on DC politics, so I don't know what the city council has or hasn't done or whatever.
They block every
pro-police
measure that the mayor tries.
Especially in neighborhoods that suffer more from violence, residents are open to more law enforcement presence. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And in fact, it tends to be poorer, blacker neighborhoods where, and those two things obviously, unfortunately in America frequently go together, where there's more receptivity to law enforcement presence. So I don't think when you look at the poll that's like 80% are opposed to Trump, I don't think that's like, oh, we just don't want more law enforcement. No, they see this for the buffoonishness that it is.
A lot of it is also negative.
That is certainly
90% of the city voted for Kamala.
But they're right to see this as being ridiculous. And not to mention, if you care about law and order, look, it goes without saying that this is the guy that pardoned, all the January 6th rioters who were like beating up cops and whatever. So
look, I'm with you.
And it's a fair point. It's a fair point to make, especially because that happened in D.C. But in addition, you don't just have the National Guard. You also have all these FBI agents who are being pulled off. Like, aren't they supposed to be doing real work? Not just standing around. I watched a video yesterday of some, I don't know what agency they're with because it's hard to tell in many instances, people just riding up and down the escalator at a metro station.
Yeah, I know.
Or picture people just like these guys just like bored standing around in an empty metro station.
That actually was my old metro station. Safest one in the entire city.
There you go. There you go.
For protecting my fellow drunken GW students. I'm sure that they needed it. Look, I agree. It is buffoonish. And the way that they execute it is preposterous. It's just but the problem has to be acknowledged. And that is the part where I can't move away from. The city and its residents basically seem to be okay with crime. I will never understand it. It's why I left. I said this place cannot be saved. Its own population basically is wedded to BLM signs over people not getting murdered. I don't know what it is. It's the sick psychology of the people who live here. But the thing is, and that's why exit was the only actual option.
It's not like outstanding nationally in terms of the rate of violent crime.
Well,
there are, in fact, red states, a number of red states have higher crime rates than blue states. I think it's Memphis and St. Louis
Memphis is the worst
that have the worst violent crime rates in the country. And while I'm sure individual policy decisions do make somewhat of a difference, you can also see that a lot of this is national trends. There was a huge national spike in crime coming in COVID and coming out of COVID. And there's been a similar national decline in crime.
Well, what happened in 2020 though? It wasn't just
cities across the country.
It was also BLM. Like, see, there is a total obfuscation of the role that BLM played in the massive spike on crime. The Ferguson effect is statistically proven. It's real. Is that these BLM style events, Trayvon Martin, Ferguson, led to the Ferguson effect, the cooling of crime enforcement. Same back in 2020, which led to an explosion in violent crime.
The cooling of crime enforcement is mostly cops like not doing their job as much.
Okay, yes, because they're afraid. Now listen, I'm not some pro-police fanatic. My response when the police pull up is lawyer. I don't have a fucking thing to say to you. Like, and that should be yours too. Don't ever talk to them without a lawyer present. Zero. Even if it's a speeding ticket, don't acknowledge nothing. Just say lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. You don't have to say a word. Even if you pull out your ID, same thing. You can lawfully comply. You don't have to say anything. It can and will be used against you in a court of law. Look out for your own rights. I want to make that very clear. But it is also empirically clear that a systematic level lack of crime enforcement and specifically soft on crime do-gooder policies like, oh, these poor little juveniles has led to an explosion of carjackings here in Washington. It's a Washingtonian problem, and it's specifically because of the federal government. Joe Biden and a bunch of like BLM-style leftists said, oh, well, we can't prosecute these poor kids, and they wreaked havoc across the city. Everybody I know is either got
a Washington specific. I'm genuinely, I don't think it can be a Washington specific problem when you see a similar dynamic happening in cities across the country, regardless of what their leadership
we have to
was doing.
disaggregate violent crime from quality of life crime. Carjacking is included in violent crime, but vagrancy is not. So San Francisco is a shithole. Can we all agree on that? At least major parts of it, the Tenderloin, etc. San Francisco has a very low murder rate. They don't have a big murder problem. They have a high violent crime rate, but it is, in my opinion, the most unpleasant city in the United States to be in. Why? Because of violent, mentally ill drug addicts everywhere who are constantly harassing you. They may not kill you, but look, we can't just sit here and say it's acceptable. I mean, I recently had dinner in Washington in a place which I had been to.
Even those stats are down in California as well.
But you're talking about violent crime. I'm talking about quality of life.
I'm talking about homelessness too, like public visible homelessness.
And part of that is
across
because
the country as well.
Part of that is the repeal of the Ninth Circuit in California, which basically allowed the California authorities to go in and clean up some of the areas. It's not just local. This again is soft on crime policy, which led to a massive explosion of the permissibility of fentanyl addicts being on every corner.
But
I just can't live in a country where it's acceptable.
So Baltimore is on track for, and Baltimore has historically been in the modern era, one of the worst cities in the country in terms of specifically murders and violent crime. And I mean, The Wire we all watched, and it's unfortunately too close to was too close to reality in Baltimore. And they are on track to have their lowest murder rate in documented history.
Yes.
And it wasn't just we're going to flood the zone with cops. It was a range of approaches, including, more after-school activities and those sorts of things that might be stereotyped as soft on crime. So, there was a model there that has been very successful that I think needs to be looked at as well. But I do also think, the national crime rate is much higher than other similar countries. And I think a good part of that has to do with guns. I think a good part of that has to do with inequality and socioeconomics. A good part of that has to be lack of social safety net. A good part of that has to do with lack of upward mobility. And then, you have had these national trends. So again, I'm not doubting, I'm not an expert on DC politics. I don't know what's been done here specifically. I'm not doubting there aren't factors that have contributed to some of the specific dynamics here. But it seems like overall, the more important dynamics have been like national, global trends, which have led to all of these cities moving in similar directions at the same time.
I would agree, but my point is that the national trend is BLM, and that was the singular most important thing in the history of crime
But
enforcement.
How do you disaggregate that from COVID?
That's part of the thing.
Because the truancy rate, that to me is directly attributable to COVID.
But those are two conjoined factors, because it's not just truancy, it's the lack of enforcement and the do-gooder, we shouldn't do anything about these poor children. And that is the toxic empathy.
Everywhere in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. But DC is an outlier. That's my point.
Out of COVID, truancy rate is up across the country because it just became like it used to be. You go to school every day, and then, you know, the message that was sent was basically like, well, it's kind of optional, and actually we're doing this thing from home. And schools across the country have been struggling with this.
Conservatives will be mad at me for saying this. We should take a lot of lessons from New York City. It is by far the safest, cleanest, and the most livable of the big cities in terms of quality of life. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is they don't tolerate this San Francisco, Los Angeles drug addiction. The vast, vast majority of people who are homeless are drug addicts. It is not a housing issue. That's one of those that I've probably switched on the most. In particular, watching it here in Washington, I watched it go from methamphetamine and like drunkenness to fentanyl. Fentanyl has wrecked this place. The fentanyl lean and what, you know, just look, anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. It's horrific. If you've ever been to Skid Row, San Francisco, it is entirely a fentanyl crisis, which has taken over these places, which leads to massive amounts of petty crime, massive quality of life problems, carjacking or car break-ins, breaking into cities. I mean, this stuff has like massive cooling effects on commerce, on the ability of people to have children. My own sister lived in San Francisco. I stayed in her apartment. I go out the door. This is a nice neighborhood, and there's a guy literally taking a shit on a stoop at 4 a.m. in the morning with a needle in his arm. I'm not joking. Like, this is real stuff. And this is the stuff that happens every single day. That is an enforcement problem. Like, clear and simple. New York does not tolerate that, even with all of their, you know, Democratic mayor, et cetera.
New York also has a requirement, a legal requirement to provide housing for everyone.
But they don't accept drug addicts in that housing.
That's an important part of it as well.
And they also have major crackdown on home. Like, people, you cannot walk your way out of this with right to housing. If you give, quote, right to housing to drug addicts, they'll rip it apart and they'll use it as a drug den. I hate to talk this way.
But the other thing, Saagar, is that there's just not nearly sufficient rehab programs for people to go into. And I actually, maybe we'll agree on this. Like, when Eric Adams shifted the criteria for the ability to, you know, deem someone like a threat to themselves or to others, and to be able to put them into an institution, like institutionalize them and get treatment. Like, I actually support things like that, because I do think that, you know, first and foremost, I care about those human beings who are unhoused, who are struggling with addiction, who are clearly living like really a miserable existence. And I do think sometimes they're in an effort to be, you know, empathetic and not to have, like, often the right just wants to like criminalize or invisibilize or push out or whatever. And so in an attempt to push back on that, there's actually a lack of empathy for what that person is going through and the type of help that they need. And so, you know, I think I am in favor of more ability to, you know, get people help even when it is against their will. I know that's a controversial thing to say, but I think if you truly have compassion for people, like, you wouldn't want someone that's your family member to be living in that state. And so, in any case, this has gone kind of far afield. But
it is,
you know,
because it is about the show. But remember, you know, the Trump MAGA and all the support for this type of stuff, and the reason why a lot of people even went along with it, you know, may be unpopular here. I need to see nationwide polling. And yes, I'm not saying they've executed.
It's unpopular nationally too.
It may be in terms of the, but like people in 2024, they were pretty fed up with a lot of this stuff, and I think I will never walk away from that is a good impetus. And even like what you were just talking about, the rehab and the confinement, that the most important shift that the left needs to make is to going from toxic empathy to paternalism. And yeah, you're gonna hate me for saying it, but the countries you all revere, like Portugal, your ass is going to jail. If you sit on a public street corner and you shoot up heroin, mandatory rehab or jail. We need to shift to that mentality. If you are in Skid Row and there's a needle in your arm and you're raping women, trying to, you know, basically so that you can give them fentanyl, you are going to jail. Those fentanyl addicts who have been reduced to that horrific state, you're getting locked up for 2 years in mandatory rehab. Not some 90-day program. 2 years. If you look at the recidivism rate on heroin and fentanyl, it's already sky high. There needs to be a basic social contract agreement for all of us where it's like, you have a problem. That problem is solvable, but it is one where we need to take away a lot of agency from you. And I'm sorry. And that is a huge problem because it conflicts with a lot of the current legal system. But this current system does not work. And it has destroyed them, and it has destroyed tax-paying citizens, businesses, and others who deserve the right to live in a safe place. So that would be my main thing. It's like, you have to embrace like the uncomfort of telling someone, we are going to deprive you of your rights for quite a long time. And it's for your own good.
It actually dovetails somewhat with the anti-eugenics monologue.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Because there was, this progressive era push to institutionalize anybody and everybody who, were seen as basically based on poverty, and sometimes it would be genuine mental illness or whatever. But there was this mass push towards institutionalizing people. And then there was a backlash against that because it went way too far and you were just completely depriving people of rights. And again, it would be someone who just was, their crime was being poor. And then you're locked up for life and sterilized, by the way. And, now you're at the point where, number one, our healthcare system is shit. There's not nearly enough rehab available. Like, even people who want to get clean and sober, they don't have a place where they can go to try to avail themselves of those services. There are way too few psychiatric beds. There are way too few rehab beds, all of those sorts of things. But I do think we've also gone too far in the other direction of, sometimes it genuinely is in a person's interest and you have to have protections in there for civil liberties, et cetera. It's a difficult balance to strike.
It's very hard.
In any case, what Trump is doing is total and complete bullshit. He doesn't care about crime. It's like, MRAPs T-boning cars in the streets. Way to go. Congratulations. And I think not just DC residents, but the polling I've seen is like the country sees through it. And you're right that just like with the, the immigration backlash, there's also a backlash to this policy where people, they saw what happened in LA too. Like, most of what's happening here in terms of law enforcement is, like DoorDash drivers getting like pulled off their mopeds is primarily
a lot of them are
going
illegal.
on.
So let's not put that aside.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.